Give a round of applause for Rory Groves.
Thank you, Rory, and thank you for being so generous with really everything, with your own family and with your property here and with just inviting us in. Rory and I have been connecting kind of at random intervals over the course of the last couple of years. He was going to come up to one of our events. We host events on our farm too. We just have a little 10-acre, I would call it a hobby farm, but it's not a hobby anymore. It's a working farm. But we love to invite people in on what we're doing. I'll get into that in just a minute. But over the course of the last couple of years, Rory and I have gotten to know each other and kind of follow each other from afar. But this is our first time today. In fact, was our first time actually meeting in person. And I really appreciate everything that Rory has done and given us a forum, and now even allowing me to speak with all of you tonight. And he set up such a nice opportunity to do that. I'm just super honored. So very much from the bottom of our hearts, thank you, Rory, and Miss Rebecca and the whole team that's been here helping us today. Really briefly, I just want to let you know about who we are. We are Rory and Becca Groves, and we live up in southern Minnesota, as I mentioned, on a small 10-acre farm. We moved our family out from Minneapolis area about 10 years ago. We were living in South Minneapolis, had a great little two-bedroom bungalow, and we had another kid on the way, and you know how sometimes that can precipitate a move? Well, that was the case for us. But in the course of looking for an extra bedroom, we also decided maybe we could get some more land and try our hand at farming a little bit, and this is something that had been on our hearts for a couple of years. So we moved out to a country property, and over the course of that time, we added a couple more farm hands, as I like to call them. My oldest son is Ivor. Is he in the room right now? He might. Yeah, there he is. Why don't you stand up, Ivor? Wait, say hi. He's 12. Thank you. Why don't you stay standing, actually. My kids. Elsie, would you stand up? Elsie's 10. She's in the front here. There you go. And then we have Hattie's at the back helping Mom. My wife, Becca, holding our youngest, Abel. She would wave, but she's holding Abel. There she goes. All right, and then we have, is Alden and Elias around here? Okay, there's Alden. He's sitting next to Ivor and Elias. Did I get them all? I'm kind of thrown out. I think we got them all. But anyways, we are just a family that loves working together and learning new things. We have goats on our farm, we have sheep, we have a large garden, we have an apple orchard. A couple of years ago, in the process of doing all of these, trying our hands at these, what we kind of thought was a hobby at the time, we discovered that there's a way of life here that is actually way more fulfilling than what I had been spending the majority of my life doing. My background is in computer science, so I've been a technologist my entire career. I mean, since I was a little kid, I was programming computers. I went to school for that. I founded multiple software businesses. This has just been my life and all I ever wanted to do until we got to the farm, and something started to happen. I tell that story a little bit in my book, but the gist of it is that really the land had a purpose for me that I wasn't anticipating when I got there. And as I started to steward the land, get my hands dirty, bring my family into the work, really discovered a kind of deeper satisfaction and contentment than anything that my career, my job, or my ambitions in trying to earn a paycheck were providing. I was finding a lot more fulfillment in that. And so one of the things that happened from that is I started to ask the question, do I want to continue down this path of separating off from my family to program a computer, to look at a screen, to, in some cases to be in cubicles or offices away from my family? Or is it possible that I could spend my life, at least what was left of it, with my family, working together in a family business? And is that even possible in these modern times? That used to be the way of things. Of course, there's farmers out there, and they go all the way back. But is there anything other than farming? I mean, is it practical for families who want to work with their families? For families who want to work together And if that's possible, what would my options be? And so what started out for me as just a personal quest for our family ended up in a book. Durable Trades is a compendium of 61 trades that have been around since before the Industrial Revolution, so going back to our nation's founding, that are still viable careers today. And all of them, to some extent or another, involve family in some way. I actually go through a whole system of how I selected them and ranked them and scored them according to different, not just how much money a job pays. You need money, I get it, you got to pay the bills. But there's a whole lot of other things. Are there opportunities for children to be involved in the work? How much education? What are the barriers to entry? What are the startup costs? How much is the trade changed? How resistant to automation is it? One of the things we're going to be talking about tonight. And so in that vein, I ended up with a book, and that book, part of that book was this newsletter that we've been writing and sharing what we're learning on our farm. I think if anyone wants a copy of these, we have them out in the back, but you can get, this is a free newsletter that we send out. All we're doing is just discussing what we're learning on the farm, and it's kind of like our main way to try to communicate some of the lessons that the land is teaching us, what God is teaching us, and then also we just really feel a heart to encourage other families. Like, we know that we're not the only ones that are being drawn to this, but a lot of times what we run into is families feel like they're kind of the black sheep, or they're the outsider. No one in my church just thinks this way. No one in my family thinks this way. I'm the only one that's drawn to these things. Why is that? And we understand that, and we talk to people all the time. So one of the things that we wanted to do with our newsletter is just to encourage people, to come up alongside them, to share stories, and sometimes you'll find stories of other people's journeys alongside as well. Rory's going to write some stories too, I hope, down the road that we can include. Maybe the story about what it was like to turn the power out for 5 days would be kind of fun to have in there. So when Rory asked me to come and speak about AI, it was based on this article that I had written, and this is really synthesizing thoughts of 35 years in technology, kind of where my assessment on where things are right now and where I think things are going. And I have to caveat that when I shared with some of our homesteading friends who raise beef cattle, they told me, you better make sure that you clarify by AI you mean artificial intelligence, and not the other artificial, the other kind of AI. So I'm going to be talking about the robot kind of AI today. And so jumping into it here, I had a conversation with a friend of mine who is an app developer, and he had a very successful smartphone app development company. I remember this maybe 6 or 7 years ago, having this conversation about some of the concerns that we had, some of the things we see coming down the pike, so to speak. And he told me, I can't think of any other industry like our industry, the tech industry, where everyone in that industry has such a sense of foreboding. And I always remember that because we have seen these things happen. We're a part of the industry, we're developing these tools, but there's always this darker side of it, and it always has this kind of ominous feel to it. And I think a lot of us by now are very well aware of some of the novel or humorous aspects of artificial intelligence. We've seen some of the things like an image generator that can create this photorealistic imagery without, just by putting a few words into a prompt, such as like astronaut riding a horse in space. Or I like this one. This one was a photo of an oversized grizzly bear wearing sunglasses and a leather jacket being interviewed on the Joe Rogan Experience. Or this one, Napoleon crossing the Alps on a Harley Davidson. And then there's the more disturbing side. For example, deep fakes and impersonations. So this person does not exist. This is a completely AI-generated person. And it's kind of eerie to think that things have gotten that realistic, to find that it can generate things that don't exist. This person does exist, actually. This is Jennifer DeStefano, pictured with her daughter, and this event happened just a few weeks ago. Jennifer, the mother in this picture, received a phone call from an unknown number, and when she picked it up, she heard her daughter crying in the background saying, "Mom, help me, Mom, help me." And then there was a man on the phone who started making ransom demands, saying that he had kidnapped her daughter. And the mother said that this was 100% her daughter's voice, never doubted it for a second. Her daughter had been on a ski trip with a group and was in a different state. I believe the mom was in Arizona and the daughter was up in Colorado. And they were able, fortunately, to quickly ascertain that the daughter was safe and no harm, and it was completely faked. But the mother was completely fooled by it. And she, fortunately, the daughter was fine, but this is a scam that's been going on now, and they call it AI voice cloning. They said they can do this with 3 seconds of a person's voice. They can construct a completely artificial voice well enough to fool people. And so, for example, even social media postings can be sources now for people to completely clone your voice and make you say things that you've never said. We have things like, what does automation mean for our jobs? What's going to happen? One UK study predicts that 47% of all jobs will be automated within the next 10 years. We're going to get into that a little bit later. And then we have things like autonomous weapons. These are also known as, now a new name, slaughter bots. Since 2021, there have been numerous reports of swarms and other autonomous weapons systems being used on battlefields around the world. This is very new. These are self-guided and self-directed, artificially intelligent machines now making decisions on the battlefield of targets to eliminate. It's not commerce that drives technology, it's power. The inventions we see appearing in everyday commerce, these pale in comparison to what is being built and constructed in secret military laboratories. These are the inventions we don't see until they're deployed on the battlefield, and AI is no exception. Some are calling the period that we're in right now the AI gold rush, and you see countries like China and South Korea and Japan making these bold, exaggerated claims about how they're going to dominate the field of artificial intelligence, and it's going to add trillions of dollars to their gross domestic product. But I think we need to be honest. It's not a gold rush. It's an arms race. Henry Adams, back in 1862, he said, "I firmly believe that before many centuries more, science will be the master of man. The engines he will have invented will be beyond his strength to control." So, going back to my conversation with Mike, my colleague, these were some of the reasons why I wrote Durable Trades. These are some of the reasons why we started to think about these things and to prepare for these things, because we knew that if this was going to be a future reality, we needed to start preparing for it now. And when I wrote the article, "The Robots Have Come," it's because in the book on Durable Trades, I talked about AI under the subhead, "The Robots Are Coming." And my conclusion now is that we have passed a point where this is very serious, things are going to speed up, and we need to be taking it seriously and getting prepared now. It's been said that the greatest failing of the human mind is the inability to understand the exponential. The concept of the exponential, so think of compound interest. Has anyone ever heard of the miracle of compound interest? Has anyone benefited from the miracle of compound interest, right? You put $10,000 in a bank account, and let's say it's 6 or 8% or whatever it is, 10%, and do nothing with it, and after something like 40 years, it's worth $1 million. Those kinds of principles, we label those as miracles. Why? What's going on? Because it's an exponential increase. And the human mind is not equipped to understand that. It's just not, it doesn't come natural to us. So the same thing can be applied to technology. At first, the changes from computerization come slowly, and it appears manageable to humans who think linearly. But soon the changes outpace our ability to deal with them, and many believe we are now approaching escape velocity, when machines will rapidly displace humans in virtually all categories of labor. Ray Kurzweil, who's a technologist, said by 2025, one computer will have the capacity of one brain. And actually, we're pretty much on track to hit that. By 2050, one computer will have the capacity of all brains. They're calling this the fifth industrial revolution. Really, I think what's going on right now, the computers and artificial intelligence, is an outworking of the industrial revolution that started over 2 centuries ago. This is broadly the period of time, and we've spent some time talking about this in other conversations, and so I'm not going to go really deep into it here tonight. But the Industrial Revolution was really a shift in how people thought about work, about family, about community. And if you could really put a nail, well, I don't know if in the coffin is the right word, but if you could put a line in the sand, the Industrial Revolution was really a crossing over to another way of life that humans really had not participated in, except for in brief experiments in some of the larger empires in history. But what we did is we reoriented life and society around efficiency. Up to that point, it had been based on relationship. In other words, the family economy. You needed a family in order to subsist. I'm not talking about like a family-based business. I mean, just to survive, all hands on deck, we work together as a family to produce the things we need. Same thing with the community. You know, the pre-industrial village was a family of families. They worked together to produce the things they need, and they leverage each other's skill sets in order to do so. Well, that is what started to change right about at our nation's founding. We started to see the factory method rise, the factory mindset, and we started to see people leave the farms and go into the cities, and we saw the focus on depending on an employer rather than depending on your own ability to provide from your own land. All those types of things started to happen back then. This time they're calling it the fifth industrial revolution, this is what they're saying about it. The fifth industrial revolution, or 5IR, encompasses the notion that harmonious human-machine collaborations human-machine collaborations representing the merger of digital, physical, and biological technologies. In the fifth industrial revolution, it promises enhanced well-being for societal actors across the board. In other words, what they're talking about is the merger of human and digital technology in this final stage. And they have, quite an optimistic. I blew up the little icon in the upper right corner, in case you couldn't see it, of a happy robot high-fiving a human in this last stage of the Industrial Revolution. Not to be confused with other icons of technical achievement in the past that we may be aware of. But the point is that artificial intelligence is really just the latest in a long line of technical innovations that began when humans were divorced from work, from the natural environment and from their families and then from their communities, when they tried to divide work from those human relationships. I want to just quote, if you allow me to quote from my article here. Okay, I'll hang on here. I say there's one thing that we can be sure of. Society will embrace AI with open arms. If the previous 2 centuries have taught us anything, it is that humans are incapable of resisting convenience. Ever since we exchanged the biblical understanding of work as worship with one of utility, man's adoption of technology to distance ourselves from the created order and its inconveniences has been an ever-moving tread in one direction. And I say all this because I think we need to realize the seriousness of the situation we're facing. I had mentioned this before already. Half of the jobs, or 47% of jobs, are expected to be automated within the next 10 years, and that has already begun. How many have gone by fast food restaurants and seen the kiosks appear now replacing? We've already seen them in the grocery stores. Now they're appearing in restaurants, and there's many ways where you see the evidences of this automation beginning to displace a whole category of work. McKinsey Global Institute says that 40 million Americans and 800 million workers worldwide are expected to be displaced by 2030. Unfortunately, it's going to disproportionately affect nations in the more modernized Western cultures that are first world countries, in other words, that are basically entirely service sector. It's the service sector jobs. It basically means that if you're in a service sector job, there's a 1 in 3 chance it won't exist by the end of this decade. Is this a false alarm? I think there's been a lot of Chicken Littles over the years saying that the sky is falling, and there's been maybe a lot of false alarms over the years, and maybe that's true. And is this just another, is AI, are we overlooking the potential benefits of the AI because there's going to be so many amazing new opportunities that are created because of it? Well, there are going to be some amazing new opportunities because of it. What we're saying is we need to count the cost of those opportunities. But if you look just at the immediate near-term benefits of some of these things, you might be thinking linearly about this problem that is truly exponential. When you go back to that first industrial revolution, you're talking about a 100-year period of time, right? Maybe 1750 to 1850, depending on how you want to put the start and end dates to that. That's a couple generations it took for this revolution to kind of sweep through and to affect society. And as you look at that chart, when electricity came in, when computing came in, when the datafication of everything came in, telecommunications, each of these different segments of industrialization that has happened in a shorter and shorter time frame, right? I mean, I don't remember off the top of my head, but I think when the telephone first came into the scene, Ma Bell and all those, it probably took 30 or 40 years before people actually adopted that technology. And then you look at cell phones, and it took maybe 20 years before that was pretty much everyone was using it. And then the internet, and then the smartphones. And so you see the rapidity of this change. We see it all the time. And so is it a false alarm? I don't think that's the case. I think that we're overlooking what could be a very serious situation if we don't begin working towards a solution now. Alan Carlson writes this in the foreword to my book. Let me see where I have that. All of the increase in occupations came as human beings adjusted their labor to accommodate the new machines, to enable the mechanical devices to become ever better, to help them in a way to evolve. In our time, however, all of those new jobs, are the very ones threatened by the culminating triumph of the machines in artificial intelligence and robotics. The human enablers, it seems, are becoming ever less important, and soon may not be needed at all. So, what is the consequences to all of this? What's the long-term impacts to our families and to our communities? To our health, to our liberty, to our freedoms, those kinds of things. And I want to emphasize that I do expect to see benefits. There are also always benefits to technology. Technologies are invented to solve problems. But what often doesn't happen is we have a very short-sighted view of these things. Lord Acton, he says this: progress, the religion of those who have none. And so what I want to put out there is that there is a ethos that drives all of this. These aren't random inventions. There's a design or a strategy here that's being worked out. And it's based on certain moral or ethical presuppositions. There's a philosophy, or you could say maybe immoral and unethical presuppositions. One of the things that I expect to happen is an acceleration of the trends that have already been in motion. I've gone into that quite a lot already, so I'm not going to repeat myself. But when we put efficiency and materialism ahead of relationship and connectedness, we've been moving faster and faster. And I think if you think about it, this acceleration of technology is, I think, a revelation of this deep need for human connectedness that's not being satisfied. So they're trying to fill this void after they've pivoted away from relationship with technology or materialism or consumerism. And it can only be satisfied by relationships which continue to fragment. Relationships with our Creator, right? Relationships with our neighbor, which just so happen to be the two greatest commandments Jesus gave us. But it is true, if you sever man from nature, he loses a very critical exposure to the creator of that nature. There's a relationship that's severed. Now, it may be short term, it may be very beneficial to be able to procure a stable supply of food from a grocery store. But there's a relationship. There's a cost to that benefit. And a lot of times, it's difficult to ascertain what those costs are when they're just passing dollars across a table, or credit cards, or CBDCs. So you see this pace change. You see this ever-moving tread in one direction, the increase in the rate of increase. I think that this is evidence of man's discontentedness with the way things are. The material abundance doesn't satisfy, so he thinks if I could just have more material abundance, I would be satisfied. But it won't work because he's continually subjecting his relationships, his resources, towards this end of gratifying his material needs. And they remain unmet, and his only recourse is to do more of it and faster. And I like Wendell Berry says, if you're skating on thin ice, speed up. So I think, unfortunately, we can see more of this going forward. We talked about the merger of digital and human technology, of artificially intelligent machines. It's called transhumanism. It's a philosophy now. They want to merge the biological with the digital. And they think that they maybe will even achieve immortality through this. They will be like gods, right? Have we heard that before? And they won't succeed, but they will leave quite a wake in their path, like a tornado. Has anyone here ever lived through a tornado? You're in Tornado Alley, a couple hands, yeah, I imagine. We had a tornado hit our property a couple years ago. It took the roof off of our barn, in fact. It created quite a lot of devastation. And I think that's what we're going through right now. I think this is like a tornado. Things are spinning faster and faster, and it's disorienting, and it's hard to understand what's going on. You know, transhumanism, like what does that even mean? What are the implications of this? And I think it's going to leave quite a wake of devastation, a mile-wide path when it's done. And we're going to have to pick up the pieces. So we have become, number two, increased consolidation. Yeah, we already talked about the ambition of power. In many ways, so Hilaire Belloc, has anyone ever heard of The Servile State? It's a book written by Hilaire Belloc. And in it, he talks about the natural tendency of democracies, even capitalist democracies, is the concentration of power and collusion between government and those corporations. Because in what starts out as liberty in a free market system, the way to gain the competitive advantage is to use the power of government to coerce, consumer slaves, essentially. And so it leads only to this one end. So you have bigger and bigger companies with more and more power. And the small little guys are getting pushed out. The free market is not actually in operation anymore because the power of government is coming to bear. And his proposition, now I don't remember when he published, but he was alive back in the 20s and 30s. So it was a ways off. But his warning was, this is the inevitable end of these things, is that power will seek out those concluded ends. And we have things today like where huge companies, too big to fail, they get, during the lockdowns and the pandemics, they weren't the ones that suffered. They got the preferential treatment. They got the bailouts. The little guys, the small restaurant shop owners, the gym owners, all of the small businesses were the ones that took the brunt of a lot of it. And a lot of our churches took the brunt of a lot of it too. But this is just the scenario of the consolidation of power. I think the upshot is what I'm trying to get at is these are some of the continued long-term impacts that are going to happen. And because of those impacts, the acceleration of trends and the consolidation of power, my biggest concern going forward is, I think, the discernment of truth, or what I refer to as the scarcity of truth. If all of society goes this way, and I have no reason to doubt that it will, then we need to brace for the future reality now, namely that information and the dissemination thereof will be further consolidated and centralized than it already is today. In other words, truth will be harder to come by. In an artificially intelligent society, truth will become the most scarce resource. That means we need to begin cultivating sources of truth now. So our society is predicated on free speech. It doesn't work if we can't speak freely. But we're no longer sitting on our front porches and speaking freely to one another. I was encouraged this morning. I got to hang out on a porch with a bunch of guys and speak freely. It's called Porch Time. And Rory was grateful enough to bring me in to his group of friends, and I get to know some really solid guys. And you know what? That's what they were doing. They're speaking freely to one another. They were informing each other of what's going on. That's a bright spot. Most of our nation is not sitting on the front porch anymore. My book was published by a publisher called Front Porch Republic. But the idea is that this face-to-face time, this community building, this is the kind of stuff that you can't break down through fact-checking and all these other, technology blocks that filter information. But when artificial intelligence, by the way, if you go on the chat bots and you start typing in questions to politically incorrect questions on these chat bots, you will be corrected and sent to the proper ministry of truth, I guarantee you right away. But things like, say, the inflation, right? Anyone ever noticed any inflation going on lately? So they changed back in February how they calculate inflation. And surprisingly, inflation is now going down. Isn't that great? Congratulations. Federals, this is being broadcast, right? I hope no one does an audit on me now. But what's going on here? They're changing the definition of these facts. The truth of how much are things actually inflating? Oh, they're going down. I just haven't noticed it yet at the gas pump or at the grocery store, but they're going down, apparently, according to official statistics. Well, these are the kinds of things, and it's going to be harder. We think we can go around the system right now, and it's going to be easy to discern that. It's not. It's going to be harder. Artificially intelligent machines will be aiding those in power. So as I mentioned, we need to be cultivating sources of truth. Number two, which include, what does that mean to cultivate sources of truth? Well, first of all, you need to find out who's speaking the truth right now. Who's doing it? Who are the watchmen on the wall? Okay? We all know people that we develop relationships with, whether they're in our own sphere, in our own communities, or there may be prophets from a distance that have ministered to us in some way. We need to support them. Okay, they're not going to be able to continue if they're reliant on finding their own support. We need to be the ones that support those people, whatever it does to cultivate those sources of truth. Also, number two, rebuild the family economy. So this is really the cornerstone of what my wife and I have dedicated our lives to with our ministry called Gather and Grow. And in a nutshell, what we want to do is we want to help families rebuild that home economy, that self-sufficiency, bringing the family together, rebuilding those relationships, being prepared for days that are ahead, uncertain days that are ahead. We believe that all starts at home. And so rebuilding the family economy is the entirety of our ministry, and that's what we really are encouraging families to. It doesn't require you to become a farmer. I encourage everyone, if you have access, you should pursue more self-sufficiency. You should pursue homesteading. You should develop traditional skills, things that all generations of humans knew up until about 2 or 3 generations ago. We all knew how to live off the land. I don't know how to live off the land. I mean, I'm starting to learn it now, but I didn't 10 years ago know the first thing of how to do that. I think everyone should do that. But to rebuild the family economy, you can start where you are. You can start with potted plants on your apartment balcony, because that's what we started with. But you can start by just simply bringing some of the functions of the household that have been delegated out back into the home. There's a lot of ways to do that, and I'm not going to go deep diving into that now, but if you start somewhere, I believe the Lord will bless that effort. And so I encourage families to do that. Number 3, we need to rebuild communities. We need to rebuild our churches. Really, community and churches, these are families of families. We need to find those people who are walking this direction. We need to link arms with them. I just think it's fascinating that never before in human history have people been able to live so isolated from each other. Think about that. Everything you need you can get from a store or a screen. You don't have to have the relationships anymore. And that's just so radically different. Even though it's the life that we all know now, it's so radically different than the last 5,000 years of human history. You had to have relationships. It mattered that you had trust. It mattered that you had a reputation in the community, a good reputation, right? You could not afford to be, excommunicated or shunned or sent out of the community. You needed to be abiding within the virtues and the morals of that community in order to just continue on surviving. So we did this for a long time, and I think we've lost a lot in the process, and it's time to wake up. When truth becomes scarce, relationships become priceless, I write. The shelter for the coming storm comes in the form of trusted relationships and local communities that are deeply loyal and unflinchingly honest. If you are not already meeting regularly with a small group or home fellowship, it's time to start. The bonds must be deep, and that takes time. So worship together, then prepare together. Further, the next thing that needs to happen is these communities need to maintain communication with one another, trusted forms of communication. There needs to be a way to link up and share information. Kind of what we're doing, what we came out here to do today was to help bring folks together that were of like mind, that were looking to link arms with others and to hopefully build some new communities. And we have met several families here today even that are already doing their own communities in their own way. And these are relationships that will be priceless in the days to come. We need to work on this kind of continuity so we can share things across borders. And then lastly, alternative economies. Well, not lastly, but the next one is we need to be building alternative economies. An alternative economy is really, let me back up and say, there's an idea of parallel economies. And I'm not really a big fan of a parallel economy if it's going off the same cliff with the rest of the economy, if it's just parallel to it, right? I mean, the idea is of like just having a conservative alternative to rack up your credit card debt with a conservative credit card company is not actually a viable solution, a sustainable solution, or a conservative dating app on your smartphone. There needs to be like face-to-face time. Get our heads out of the screen, so to speak. Looking each other in the eyes again. So the thing about technology, and I'm speaking to you as someone who lived, breathed, and ate technology for my entire career, the thing about it is it's basically insulating you from the natural environment. That's the idea. The idea is to make things more convenient. And so you have to approach it with caution. I think it can be a tool, but also you have to understand what's the motive behind that tool. Mainly, we need to become producers again, not just consumers. We have to start producing the things we need. Like I said, bringing the functions of the household back into the home. Food, fiber, shelter, right? These are essential skills that will always be in demand. Are you handy? Can you raise animals? Can you grow food to feed your own family? These are things that everyone can do. You don't need a lot of land, as I already said. Can you start a home-based business? Think about this. A lot of time you look at the calculations, well, what's my education? How much time do I have? It makes the most sense to do this job because it has this salary. Well, maybe, but maybe forsaking a higher salary today from a large employer in favor of a modest wage from a home-based business, really do the calculations. That might determine the difference, whether you still have a job in a few years. You don't know right now where some of these high-paying, large company jobs are going to go. And if they're highly specialized, they don't have general applicability, you don't have a generalized skill set involved that's super highly specialized, they can be here today and gone tomorrow. I think one of the interesting facets about the Industrial Revolution was that in my book I do this chart, and there's like, at the founding of our country, there's like 70 distinct occupations. Total. Like if you're not going to become a farmer, there's like 69 other things you can do, and that's it. And today we're up to like 30,000 and probably adding thousands every year of distinct professions. So that level, that degree of specialization, what's interesting about that is almost all of the jobs that were created from that specialization from the last 200 years have also been eliminated in the last 200 years by newer innovations. But of those original 70 distinct occupations, 61 of them are still here. That's interesting to me. What is that? Well, it's food, fiber, and shelter. These are jobs that are oriented around basic needs. And you will never be without if you have those kinds of things. So, as I said, if you need some ideas, by the way, I've got a book I can show you. As I said, an alternative economy is nothing more than a collection of families working together towards a common end. And this is something that builds up. Usually you have a family, in a pre-industrial setting, you would maybe have one family would be, most of the families are going to be in agriculture, period, providing food for the community or for themselves. And they're mostly going to be focused on their own families first. This was not a how much can we grow to sell at the farmer's market on Saturday. It was how many potatoes do we need to plant to have potatoes all winter long? Ivor, what's the answer to that question? Well, it depends on how many potatoes you eat all winter long, he says. We just put 360 plants in the ground because we figured out we need about a pound of potatoes a day. But these are the kinds of things that, and we're not selling potatoes. I mean, I guess we might have some left over, but the goal is, what do we actually need for our own family? Even that is kind of a unique way because we're so focused on monetizing everything now. But subsistence was the way that humans, the natural rhythm of most of humanity for most of human history. What do we need to provide for ourselves? They were producers, producing for yourself. And then if there's surplus, you sell the surplus. And then everyone in the community, you might have people with certain specialized skills. You might have the blacksmith, the metal worker, these different things. And I'm not saying that we go back to that model. I'm just saying there's things we can glean from history. It was a lot more stable. Their jobs weren't being eliminated by artificial intelligence back then. And lastly, divine providence. I like how Ben Franklin put it in, I think, one of the speeches when they were trying to pull together, ratify the Constitution. And I like how he put it when he said, if a sparrow cannot fall without his knowledge, can an empire rise without his aid? And I think we're looking at the enormity of the situation, and we need to also, I'm concerned about this stuff, as you can tell, but also I know who is sovereign, who is in control, right? And so I know that I happen to be alive during this window of time where there is going to be a massive disruption to the way people work and live and relate to each other. It's going to hit our families. It's going to hit our churches. It's going to hit our communities. It's going to hit our nations. It's going to hit the battlefield. We're just in the beginning, opening salvos of this. We're alive right now. For some reason, God chose this moment of history for all of us to be alive in. Okay? Now, it's His story. History is His story. So we need to be in constant prayer about this, and we need to be seeking direction and protection from divine providence, from God. There's this concept of the remnant that you see in Scripture over and over again. And God always keeps some people around when the rest of society is plunging headlong into the abyss, right? And you never really know who the remnant are. God doesn't, even Elijah, when he was hiding out saying, I'm the last one. I'm the only faithful one left in all of Israel. And what does the Lord say? You don't know about this, but I have reserved 7,000 who have not bowed the knee to Baal. And He has reserved the remnant. And you don't know who they are. You don't know if you're it. We don't get to decide. God decides that. But I do think that there are clues, I think you see those who are keeping the faith. They're persevering through persecution. You see them building their arks, right? They're getting ready to bring their families with them. I think you see the hearts of the fathers turn to the children. To me, that's a clue. That's a clue. What does He say at the end of the Old Testament? Malachi. He says, And in the last days I will turn the hearts of the fathers to the children, the hearts of the children to the fathers, lest I come and smite the earth with a curse. And then as a friend of mine says, then he gave a 400-year pause for effect. But the point is the turning of the hearts to the children, thinking generationally, not how much money do I need to sock away to have a comfortable retirement. It's what do I need to be doing for my great-grandchildren right now? Now, today. I can still walk around and move and lift things. What do I need to be investing in for those relationships, for them to have a passageway into whatever world they need to renew? That's where the focus is. And when you find folks that are walking that way, and if that is what God has put on your heart, make sure you link arms with those folks. Chances are they're going to be headed in a direction that you want to go. The scripture says, do not fret because of evildoers, nor be envious of the workers of iniquity. For they shall soon be cut down like the grass and wither as the green herb. Trust in the Lord and do good. Dwell in the land and feed on his faithfulness. Delight yourself also in the Lord, and he shall give you the desires of your heart. Thank you.